Yanan stood towering over the monster, her glowing eyes locked onto it. Without hesitation, she clenched her fist, power surging around it. Seeing this, the monster panicked, realizing she was about to strike. In an instant, Yanan swung her fist with immense force. The monster's expression twisted in terror as the impact struck, sending a powerful shockwave through the air. The force of the punch crushed down on the creature, hurling it backward as it let out a desperate scream. The sheer force from Yanyan's punch sent shockwaves through the ground, pinning the monster down. It struggled, realizing that just the pressure from her attack was enough to immobilize it. Shock and disbelief filled its eyes as it processed the overwhelming difference in power. Frustrated and refusing to accept defeat, the monster let out a deafening roar, its rage reaching its peak. Its body surged with energy as it tried to break free, but before it could act, Yanyan's next attack had already begun. The ground shattered beneath them as she unleashed a relentless barrage of blows. Each strike sent the monster crashing deeper into the ruins, the force tearing apart the surroundings. Buildings crumbled, and the very earth trembled under her might. The monster could do nothing but scream as Yanyan's overwhelming power continued to crush it without mercy. The shockwaves from Yanyan's devastating attacks rippled through the city, sending tremors across the streets. People scrambled for cover as the force of her power reached them. Amid the chaos, a group of men tried to warn President, urging him to be cautious. But he remained composed, his gaze fixed on the battlefield. His subordinates were in disbelief. This power didn't match the Yanyan they once knew. Her strength had reached an entirely different level. They murmured among themselves, realizing that with someone like her, the base might actually have a chance at survival. However, President wasn't convinced that things would be that simple. Watching Yanyan from below as she stood atop the ruins, he knew that this situation was far from over. Yanyan let out a powerful roar, her energy erupting as the ground beneath her shattered. The sheer force of her scream sent shockwaves across the area, forcing everyone nearby to cover their ears. President's subordinates barely managed to shield themselves, shouting warnings to each other as the pressure grew unbearable. As the dust settled, Yanyan's form began to change. A dark aura enveloped her body, and cracks of energy surged through her veins. Her glowing eyes burned even brighter, her stance becoming more primal. President observed the transformation with a grim expression. His men were in disbelief, questioning what had happened to her. President, realizing the situation was getting out of control, urgently commanded his team to locate Suchan. He was the only one who could possibly stop Yanyan before she destroyed everything in her rampage. A woman stepped forward, declaring that she was the only speed-type ability user present. Without hesitation, she activated her powers, her body surging with energy as she dashed forward at an incredible speed, leaving behind a trail of pink energy. Meanwhile, in a distant location, deep inside a fortified building, Suchan stood in the shadows. Suchan stood amidst the ruins, observing the battlefield. The place was littered with fallen enemies, their numbers reduced drastically. He calmly assessed the situation, but before he could react further, a glowing energy swirled around him, and as he turned, he saw a pink aura manifesting beside him. She floated near him. Suchan questioned how she had appeared, clearly not expecting her sudden presence. She explained that, due to a recent anomaly, she had discovered the ability to freely move in and out of his body, something that had never happened before. The woman pointed at the ground, suggesting they could follow the trail left behind to track their target. Suchan, however, dismissed her interference, insisting that he had things under control and she should stop meddling. Frustrated, she reminded him that she was only trying to help, but he waved her off, telling her not to make things worse. Ignoring his protests, she suddenly got an idea and smirked, eager to show off her abilities. Before Suchan could react, she wrapped herself around him, propelling them both forward at high speed. Caught off guard, he shouted in frustration, demanding that she stop her reckless behavior. Meanwhile, she simply laughed, enjoying the chaos she was creating. The woman laughed uncontrollably as she carried Suchan through the sky at an incredible speed, effortlessly maneuvering between buildings. Despite his initial frustration, he had to admit that their speed had significantly increased. As they soared through the city, she proudly pointed out how efficient her method was, while Suchan remained skeptical. However, before he could argue further, she suddenly noticed something unusual in the distance. As she urged Suchan to take a look, He turned his gaze towards the direction she indicated, his eyes narrowing. As they flew closer, Suchan's eyes widened. Yanan was in the distance, towering over the city in her berserk state. The woman with him also recognized her, but was shocked by her uncontrollable transformation. Suchan immediately assessed the situation, realizing that something had triggered Yanyan's loss of control. If this continued, her unstable energy would eventually lead to self-destruction. Hearing this, the woman clung to him tighter, smirking despite the dire circumstances. She mused that if Yanan was truly on the verge of exploding, things had just gotten much more complicated. As Suchan and the woman descended, they realized the situation was worse than expected. Chaos filled the streets, and a powerful enemy stood in their way. A man with a confident smirk gathered energy in his hands, taunting his opponents. He considered them weaklings who had yet to fully control their abilities. With a surge of power, he unleashed an attack infused with all the strength he had stolen. At the same time, the cat roared, its eyes burning with a fierce glow as it countered with its own overwhelming energy. The battlefield erupted with immense force, and Suchan quickly realized that these two enemies were on a completely different level, as the cat launched a devastating attack. Its massive limbs swung with terrifying speed, striking an unfortunate fighter and sending him flying. Meanwhile, the beast's glowing eyes locked onto the Duan, declaring its intent to purify her. Without hesitation, it lashed out, landing a direct hit on her. However, instead of panic, a smirk appeared on her face as she absorbed the impact. Turning to Duan, she gave him a sly look, amused by the situation. She posed a cruel dilemma: who would he choose to save? As Duan taunting Suchan with his impossible choice, the monstrous attack closed in on her. At the last second, a swift tendril lashed out. Sparks erupted upon impact, halting the incoming strike before it could reach her. Suchan, eyes glowing with an intense purple hue, had somehow taken control of her abilities. Shocked, she questioned how he was capable of manipulating her powers, but Suchan's focus.
This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.